The Yuletide season evokes thoughts and memories of glorious days of frost, ringing bells, and the magical aromas wafting from a warm, loving kitchen. And yet, the days are shorter, and the nights become long, dark, and cold journeys into a bizarre winter realm of menace, monsters, and wandering spirits. Blackwater Media presents A Creepy Christmas. It was Christmas time of 1995 or 96. I'm not sure of the year. But we were at my aunt's house on a reservation in North Dakota. Some of my family was in the living room watching TV. The kids were playing in the rooms or sleeping, and my uncle, aunt, and I were sitting at the table putting a puzzle together. My cousin, who worked at a casino, would come home around midnight or 1 a.m. Now, on that particular night, as she pulled up and was walking towards the house, my cousin looked in the window and saw me sitting at the table, my uncle sitting across from me, and someone standing to the left of me, and then someone standing in the corner. So she continued to walk into the house thinking nothing of it. As we were sitting there talking, she looked at me and asked who was standing next to me a few minutes ago and who was in the corner. I told her no one, and she said, "Oh yeah, there was someone standing next to you. And it looked like your mom, and she was playing with your hair." I have long hair, which I used to wear down all the time. She said this person was running her hand on my hair, like a mother does a child. Now you can imagine that this kind of freaked me out. I was about 15 at the time. My cousin swore up and down that someone was standing over me, rubbing my head and watching me put the puzzle together with my aunt and uncle, and that there was another person standing behind that person. We got around to thinking that it was probably my mom she saw. She passed away on her birthday a week before Christmas back in 1992. In my family, we consider our aunts and uncles to be just like our moms and dads. After thinking it could have been her, it didn't scare me so much. However, we couldn't figure out who the person was standing in the corner. And always around Christmas time, something strange happens. And we just think it's her visiting us. At least, that's who we hope it is. It was Christmas time just before my 18th birthday. Me and a couple of friends decided it would be a laugh to do the Ouija board. It all started off okay. We were pushing the glass around to freak each other out. A few hours later, we stopped playing, but the glass didn't. It kept moving. We were all in shock. I ended up tipping the board just to stop it. From that day on, I've seen this face on the wall. It's not human. It looks pure evil. I can only describe it as a beast, like it's moved from wall to window to mirror and keeps threatening me. It chants and screams at me. It told me its name, but I refuse to say it or even write it down. As I've read, if you take notice of it, it gets stronger, and I don't want to invite it in. I no longer have any mirrors in the house, but it started visiting my dreams. I'm alone in a room when it appears, and it tells me what it is. It will have me, and it won't rest until it's got me. I'm 25 now, so this has been going on for a while. I'm scared it will go after my children, as my oldest won't sleep in her room and is too scared to tell me why. It was Christmas Eve, and the family was gathered in the living room. The father was reading the newspaper, and the mother was knitting a sweater. The children, Jim and Steffa, were stretched out on the floor with their crayons and coloring books. "Will you tell us a story?" Steffa demanded. Yeah, a scary one, Jim insisted. All right, said their father. I'm going to tell you about the most fearsome, dangerous, and appalling creature in the world, and it's called the Grither. Oh, now you've done it, said their mother. You said his name out loud. Who is he? Asked Jim. He's the most awful thing in the world, their father said. He lives in a cave at the North Pole. The coldest, wettest place on earth is where the Grither makes his home. He sleeps in the wreck of a ship that somehow got squeezed into the mouth of the cave. He doesn't mind the cold and he doesn't mind the wet, but the thing he hates most of all is to hear someone say his name. He has very good ears, and they might get bigger every time his name is spoken anywhere on earth. Sometimes his ears get so big, he can use them to fly. I don't like this story, Steffa whined. Too late now, her mother said. We've already mentioned his name. The Grither is probably on his way to our house this very minute. It will probably take him a while to get here, said their father. If we finish the story before he gets here, everything will be fine. By the way, do you know why the Grither is called the Grither? Why? The children asked. Because he has fists as big as basketballs and arms as long as boa constrictors, said their father with a grin. Whenever he finds the people who've been speaking his name, he opens up his fists, reaches out his arms, and grithers them in. He grabs them by the head and squeezes them until they pop, just like a balloon. Does he look like a Bigfoot? Jim asked. No, said his father. He's not like Bigfoot, and he's not like the abominable snowman either. Nobody knows what he looks like for sure. The only people who've ever seen the Grither are the people the Grither has eaten. He's as tall as a tree, but he can bend all the way over and touch the ground. His skin looks like a road map because it's transparent and all his blue and red veins show through. The blue is for fear, and the red is for rage. Hurry up and finish the story before he gets here, Steffa cried. The Grither was born on a sailing ship, said her father. It was blown off course by a storm and got lost in the Arctic Sea. They drifted around for weeks and never saw anything but glaciers and icebergs. Some of the passengers drowned, some froze to death, some starved, and the rest committed suicide. The Grither was born out of the fear and rage of all those people. But why does he kill people? Jim asked. Nobody knows, said his father. He just doesn't like anyone telling his story. Is that all? Steffa asked. Is that the end of the story? Not quite, said her father. There's only one way to protect yourself from the Grither. And maybe you should stop, the mother interrupted. I think you've scared them enough. The father chuckled. You don't believe in the Grither, do you? He asked. No. The children lied. Well, you shouldn't, their father said, because I made it all up. There's no such thing as the Grither. But you didn't finish the story, Steffa whined. All of a sudden, the front door blew open, and the room was enveloped in an icy blast of wind. There was a crash and the sound of breaking glass. Then two huge, gnarled arms reached in through the windows and grasped their parents by their heads. As the children watched in terror, the hands squeezed, and their parents' heads popped, just like two balloons. I'd like to tell you a very strange story, a Christmas story as it were. Now it happened years ago. I was only 7 years old, but the terror has remained with me now for more than 40 years. It was Christmas Eve of 1975, and I was very excited to see what I was going to get on Christmas Day. So I crept down the stairs at 2 or so in the morning. The grandfather clock in the hallway was slowly ticking. I remember it very well. I found myself shaking as I turned the living room doorknob. Was I that excited? Why did the metal feel so cold? So as not to wake my parents, I slowly pushed the door open. It would squeak if you did it too fast. And I crept into the living room. It was dark and cold. I mean, it was so cold I could make out my breath in the little light that was there. Was the heating broken? The switch to the dimmer lights was next to the door. I turned it on and slowly turned the dial. In the diminishing gloom, I could make out the armchairs and the Christmas tree, beneath which I could already glimpse the presents. And the leering, skinless face that was now just an inch away from me. Its pupilless eyes seemed to stare straight through me as its stench hit my nostrils like rotting meat via burnt ozone. The thing reared back, its lipless face falling back behind the ragged hood it wore. It turned away and lurched and limped towards the tree. I could see more of it now. It was stooped and withered, emaciated and cadaverous, draped with the rotting rags of what I guess must have once been a robe. The thing seemed mesmerized by the tree. Its head swiveled eerily from side to side as it contemplated what was before it. Then it turned and looked directly at me, lifting a bony finger up to its face where its lips may once have been. My mouth was agape and I was rooted to that spot. I tried like hell to scream, but no noise came out. Finally, I managed to slowly retreat from the living room, turning off the light as I went. I closed the door quietly and crept up the stairs, too petrified to do anything else. I ran to my room and hid under the covers. Only then did I manage to finally, silently sob with fear. Next morning, I put on a brave face and pretended to be excited as I unwrapped my presents with everyone else. Mom must have known there was something wrong, as she asked if I was okay. Of course, I lied and said I was just tired as I couldn't sleep the night before, as you do when you're 7 and it's Christmas Eve. She hesitated for just a moment, but brushed it off as we picked up all the torn wrapping paper left behind. But all I could think of was that thing I saw the night before. I barely played with my new toys. I just kept seeing its face every time I closed my eyes. As the years have drawn on, I've pondered this in some detail. We've forgotten what Christmas really is. It's how we used to survive the darkest, grimmest time of the year. That's what all the tinsel and merrymaking and Santa Claus all stems from, that need to shut out the darkness and the howling blizzard outside. Yet, I think there's something else too. All those ideas about Christmas being magical is true. We dress it up with elves and reindeer with red noses, but it's more than that. There's a reason why we used to tell ghost stories at Christmas till Halloween took over. It is the one point of the year where the boundaries between this world and the others are at their thinnest. No wonder they have a festival and a nativity this time of year. Consciously or not, we're warding off the horror that seeps into our world during the Yuletide. Maybe that's it. Maybe all the rituals appease the things that wait and ward them off for another year. What's a Christmas tree but an old pagan totem decorated in candles? A ward or an appeasement? Anyway, I can attest to the fact that Christmas is indeed a season of mystery, strangeness, and of spirits. Oh, there's one last thing I'll never forget. All those years ago, the following night I found a scrawled note under my pillow. It said just one word. Shh. The Yuletide season evokes thoughts and memories of glorious days of frost, ringing bells, and the magical aromas wafting from a warm, loving kitchen. And yet, the days are shorter, and the nights become long, dark, and cold journeys into a bizarre winter realm of menace, monsters, and wandering spirits. Blackwater Media presents A Creepy Christmas. What I'm about to tell you took place 4 years ago and still haunts me to this day. It was Christmas night, and my family were driving home from this fancy restaurant. Now I, unlike my family, wasn't tired, so the 45-minute drive seemed perpetual. On top of that, my little sister was constantly moaning about how her friend didn't get her anything for Christmas. After about 20 minutes of driving, my dad stopped at a gas station to get some cigarettes, and my sister, brother, and mother all got out to use the restroom. I stayed in the car as I'd already gone before we left. Once they all got out, I decided to play a few games on my phone. I looked at the dashboard clock and saw that 10 minutes had passed, so I immediately wondered what was taking them so long. As soon as I peered out the car window, I saw a man staring at our car. The man startled me as I didn't know how long he'd been watching. What made it even more unnerving is that he had a plain, blank face. No expression. It was hard to make out any features as it was pretty dark, and he wasn't standing in an illuminated part of the station. He was around 5'9" and looked to be middle-aged. Once he saw me notice him, he started walking towards the car, and I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't scared. Luckily, my dad came back with the rest of the family just as the man took a couple of steps. My dad apologized and told me he'd been in an argument with the cashier. I didn't give a shit. I was just glad that my dad was with me. I took another glance at the man outside and he was still staring. But this time he had an annoyed look on his face. Anyway, we drove off, and for the rest of the car ride, I couldn't stop thinking about that man. Now, this wouldn't have been too bad if it had ended there, but it didn't. Later that night, I was watching YouTube while everyone else slept, and luckily for me, a storm was raging over us. Now, one thing you should know about me, I enjoy storms. They make me feel kind of cozy as I'm laying in bed. I put my phone down and just enjoyed the ambiance. That didn't last for long, because I heard something smash into the window behind me. I lurched forward and nearly fell out of the bed. I thought a bird had just smashed into the window. I parted the blinds, and what I saw next terrified me. I saw a man standing out by my parents' cars, looking up at my room. I took a closer look and nearly had a damn heart attack. It was the same man that I saw at the gas station. Only this time, when our eyes met, he grinned. Now, being the 14-year-old I was, I did the manly thing and screamed at the top of my lungs. My dad came running down the stairs and entered the room and said, "Why the fuck are you screaming?" So, I told him about the man and I explained everything that happened. My dad grabbed a baseball bat and told me to call the police. After 10 minutes, the police turned up outside our house and found the man in our shed. He got arrested, and that was the last time I saw him. The next day, my dad inspected the house and we found the handle of our back door had been damaged, but not completely broken. This gives me an eerie feeling as if he actually managed to get in. He could have harmed or possibly killed us. The Yuletide season evokes thoughts and memories of glorious days of frost, ringing bells, and the magical aromas wafting from a warm, loving kitchen. And yet, the days are shorter, and the nights become long, dark, and cold journeys into a bizarre winter realm of menace, monsters, and wandering spirits. Blackwater Media presents A Creepy Christmas. My mother, to whom I was very close, passed away in 1964 when I was 17 years old. I left home that year and moved to Ontario from Nova Scotia. In 1969, I met a girl whom I will call Karen, and we got married in March of 1970. It was Christmas Eve 1971, and we just finished putting gifts under the tree, and a nice fire gave off a beautiful glow. On the tree, one string of lights which was supposed to flash had stopped several days before. It was 5 minutes to midnight when the fireplace suddenly just went out and the string of lights started to flash. And the other light stopped flashing. My wife and I were sitting on the floor and it became very chilly in the room. I looked over to my lazy boy chair and a figure was sitting there. My mother, with a big, beautiful smile on her face. My wife, who had never met my mother, said she could see the same thing. She never spoke, but just kept looking at me and my wife and smiling. At midnight, the fire in the fireplace started up again, and the lights on the tree stopped flashing, and the others started flashing. I looked over in the chair, and the ghost was gone. No matter what I did to those Christmas lights, they never flashed again. The Yuletide season evokes thoughts and memories of glorious days of frost, ringing bells, and the magical aromas wafting from a warm, loving kitchen. And yet, the days are shorter, and the nights become long, dark, and cold journeys into a bizarre winter realm of menace, monsters, and wandering spirits. Blackwater Media presents A Creepy Christmas. I want to start off by saying that, yes, I have heard of the creatures that appear to be upright walking wolves called dogmen. As far-fetched as some people think it is that these things exist, I tended to believe that they could actually be real, but never really imagined that I would ever see one. So, let me tell you about something that happened on Christmas Eve 5 years ago. My wife and I live in Atlanta, but we own some property in South Georgia. We even have a little place down there that we use as a kind of retreat from the city once or twice a year. Now let me explain something to you. Our property in general, and the house in particular, sit right up against the Dixon Memorial State Forest, which is 35,000 acres of serious, deep woodland. In turn, the forest is positioned on the northwest side of the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge. In other words, I'm talking about the very definition of the word wilderness. Anyway, a week or so after Thanksgiving, my wife and I got it into our heads that it might be fun to spend Christmas at our place down in South Georgia. We both liked the idea of getting away from the rush and tumult of the city for a little while. It would also be a little warmer down there, but not so much that we couldn't enjoy a nice fire during the evening hours. So aside from enjoying the scenery, we arrived at the house after an uneventful 4-hour drive. We got there about a half hour before sundown. I got the cooler out of the car and into the kitchen. My wife started preparing a couple of steaks for dinner while I got everything else unpacked and sorted. After that, I got a fire going, made a whiskey highball, turned the TV to ESPN, and started watching football. Everything was ready by 7, and as we sat down to eat, we both agreed to start working on the Christmas tree afterward. After about 5 minutes into the meal, we heard a sound that froze us both dead in place. It was a deep, terrifying howl that seemed to reverberate and come at us from every direction. I remember the expression on my wife's face, and her eyes were as wide as I'd ever seen them. Mine must have been too. And she asked me point blank, "What the fuck was that?" So of course my brain started processing all of the possibilities, because I knew that there was plenty of wildlife out there in that insane stretch of woods, including coyotes. I knew that what we just heard wasn't a goddamn coyote. The next thing we heard was the distinct sound of something moving around outside. Now by outside, I mean just outside of the house. Something very close by. Now there were 2 windows that you could look out and see the front part of the property, and 2 that would allow you to see the back, including the wood line. So we went to the front windows to look out, really hoping to see nothing. Instead, we saw something right out of a damn nightmare. About 10 yards away was what looked like an incredibly large wolf. And I mean like the size of a horse. It looked incredibly powerful, and its head was tilted up slightly as if it were trying to catch a scent in the air. My wife stood there gaping, not saying a word, and I thought she might be in a mild state of shock. And if all this wasn't enough, this goddamn thing reared up and stood on its hind legs. You heard what I said, right? We're standing there, looking out the window, and this monster wolf, 8 to 9 feet tall, black fur, and a mouthful of big-ass teeth. But it was the eyes on this thing. Those eyes were enormous and burned yellowish orange. And there was an absolute look of stone-hard malevolence in them. We kept watching, almost afraid to take our eyes off of it. It started to walk in a direction that would take it around the side of the house towards the back. We quickly moved to one of the back windows, the one in the kitchen. We got there just in time to see the creature drop down onto all 4 legs and dash to the wood line and into the darkness of the forest. This thing was so big and so fast we could actually hear the sound of the impact it made as it crashed into the thicket. A few seconds later, we heard the howl again, and this time there was no mystery about what it was. We talked about it all through dinner and kept on talking about it while decorating the tree and sipping on larger than usual after-dinner cocktails. These creatures were real, and we talked about how many other things out there probably existed too. Creatures like Bigfoot or Chupacabra, and even the Loch Ness Monster or Mothman. I mean, shit, why not? If dogmen are real, then everything else is on the table. One thing is for sure. That was one Christmas that we will never, ever forget.